Wisp Sports Radio, the voice of women in sport.
Hello, and thank you for downloading The Bolder Woman here on Wisp Sports. This is Season 1, Episode 17, and I'm Chris Stafford. And this is the show where we tell the stories of women who are competitive in a range of sports around the world, and we hear in their own voice what motivates them still to be the best they can be in their chosen sport.
The voices in your head, you've put your courage to the test, laid all your doubts to rest. Your mind is clearer than before, your heart is full and wanting more, your future's at the door. Give it all you got, no hesitating, you've been waiting all your life.
Our guest this week is British Ultra-Runner Sharon Gayter, who has come a long way, quite literally, since enduring a difficult childhood that left her socially scarred and lacking confidence to take part in any sport. Now, at the age of 55, she has clocked up too many miles to count, with record-breaking performances around the world that have fueled her ambition for yet more milestones. Sharon has gone from bus driver to university lecturer, turning her life around as her world has pivoted around her running career. She has run over 1,500 races, over 30,000 miles, and represented her country at ultramarathons for some 18 years. But who's counting? Her world records include Land's End to John O'Groats in England and Mizen Head to Malin Head in Ireland. Sharon has set 3 world records at Teeside University, where she teaches, running on the treadmill. Her 833 kilometres in 7 days is still 6 kilometres ahead of the men for the 2018 Guinness World Records book. In January of 2018, she completed 10 marathons in 10 days on a treadmill, and we'll hear about her plans this year to break even more world records. Sharon, hi, welcome to the programme.
Hi, hello Chris.
Tell me a little bit about where you're based, because you've got the perfect training ground there, haven't you? But for our wider audience, just set the scene for us.
Yeah, I live at a place called Gisborough, which is right on the edge of the North York Moors, which is one of our national parks, and that's where nearly all my training is done, and we have lots of races there, trail races, fell races, and I often run around the skirt, around the bottom of that, to actually run to work and back in the mornings as well, too.
So running to work and back is what now? You're a university lecturer. Tell us a little bit about what that involves and how long a run you get to work.
I'm a sports scientist, so it kind of goes well with my sport, and it's the reason I trained as a sports scientist, because I became an ultra-distance runner 30 years ago, and there were no coaches in ultra-distance running, so I went to university to do a sports science degree to understand how my body adapted to training, and it's turned full circle. I'm now a lecturer, and the distance to work is actually 11 miles, so when I train to work and back, it's 22 miles for the day. I tend to do that about 3 times a week, sort of back-to-back midweek runs, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then race every weekend.
Does that give you enough then, 22 miles a day, 3 times a week?
Yeah, that does. If you think that's 66 miles over 3 days. And I do train on the other days. It's not as though I don't train, but I don't run to work and back. And at weekends, I normally do at least a marathon of distance. So I probably rack up about 90 miles, 80, 90 miles on an average week, and more when I'm building up to a big event. So, just over a week ago, I did 220 miles in a week because I am building up to my next big event. So, 80, 90 miles is enough for an average week.
Yeah, that's pretty good going, isn't it, in terms of mileage? It reminds me of another guest we've had here on the network, not on this show because she doesn't qualify. She's not over 50. Courtney DeWalter. I don't know if you've come across Courtney.
Oh, yes, I've heard the name. Certainly have heard the name, yes.
And she clocks up a few miles too, so I think you'd be good training partners. And she also goes all over the world like you do. But you're doing it at the age of mid-50s now, and you've been doing it quite a while. Was it running something that you did as a child? Was this a natural progression for you as a child in school? Is that where you started?
No, not in the slightest. I was completely opposite. I never did any sport at school. Our school only did netball and hockey. I can't throw a ball, I can't catch a ball, and I was just absolutely useless at the only two sports our school did. They very rare did cross-country running, and so I never really did anything. It wasn't until I left school, went to work, and then became a little bit lazy because I come from Cambridge originally, and we used to ride my bike everywhere. Then when you're 18, you get your first car, and then the bike goes in the garage, never to be used again. So I realised I was quite unfit, and I wanted to do the London Marathon, which I'd seen on TV. So that is what kind of got me into running, wanting to do that, and still didn't do anything about it till a friend at work bought me a pair of running shoes, and I just felt so guilty I had to use these shoes. And that's when I started running to train for the London Marathon. And I had no idea back then what I would end up doing. It was just, okay, I had this little goal, went and did London Marathon, thoroughly enjoyed every minute of running it. And once I did it, I kind of stopped running because I didn't really know what to do with myself. You know, I needed to set another goal. And a lot of people, when they do a marathon, oh, yeah, you got to run it faster. But for me, the challenge to run the marathon was to see if I could actually run a marathon. Once I did it, I knew I could do it, so why do it again? But it was that training where, you know, when you've never run a mile before and it takes you 3 weeks to run 1 mile, and then you get to do 2 miles and 3 miles. And before the marathon, the longest I'd run was 17 miles. So to me, 26 miles was a challenge. I didn't know that I could run it. And eventually I realised, okay, got to set another goal. And I found this 50-mile event in the North York Moors. I just moved up from Cambridge up to the northeast. Oh, 50 miles, you know, that's a new challenge. All over the hills, sounds fantastic. So I went and did this 50-mile event. I got lost half a dozen times and learnt a few lessons that you got to find your route before you do these races. And I came third lady, despite getting lost many times. So I vowed the next one I'd do, I'd find the route in advance and then go and do the race, and realised I had a little bit of talent for the long stuff. And again, another pure coincidence, but there was a 100-mile event, and it just happened to be 5 miles down the road from me. So again, no intention to be an ultra-distance runner. I just liked the figure of 100 miles, did okay at 50 miles, let's try it. 500 starters, did my homework, did a recce, and I come fifth overall out of 500 people and realised I was pretty good at this long-distance stuff. And that was kind of, that sown the seed for the future, really, of where my career was heading. And at that time, I was late 20s. And I think it was the following year after that, I tried my very first 100-kilometre and 24-hour event, which happened to be the national championships. Won gold medal in both of them, got instant selection for my country. Next 18 years were representing Great Britain at 100 kilometres and 24 hours.
I want to take you back to what actually was the catalyst for you wanting to run the London Marathon, because clearly that was the turning point.
Yeah, there was a catalyst, and I suppose, you know, I can speak about it now, it was hard at the time, but childhood for me was not very pleasant. I didn't have a good childhood. My sister tried to commit suicide because of family life. My brother got put in a home. So I was a very withdrawn child. And when I started work, I couldn't progress in life because I was so quiet. I didn't have any social skills, couldn't really talk much. I just did my work, got on with it. And running really, I think, was a sense of achievement for me that I actually was a person and I could do something. You know, people didn't want to know me. I didn't go out. I didn't socialise, didn't do anything, didn't have much of a conversation. When I started running, it's, oh, I'm doing the London Marathon. And then, wow, you're doing the London Marathon. People wanted to talk to me, talk about training, talk about the experience. And, you know, I found I had this conversation with people that I didn't have before. And then it kind of built up from that. When you did a 50-miler, it was like, how far are you running? You know, these distances don't exist, because you're talking about 30 years ago when there wasn't many ultra-distance races. And then the 100-miler, it kind of just blew people away. What do you do at night? Do you sleep? No, you just run through the night with a head torch. So, yeah, I think that was the catalyst, home life, and another reason for why I left Cambridge, to be away from the family. So, yeah, I became a person in my own right when I began running, which, you know, I just didn't have, there wasn't much to Sharon Gayter before then.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because everyone has their own personal story, Sharon, and we hear with any sport, with any success in sport, behind every athlete there is a support crew. There are people that are cheering you on your way, and having had that difficult start, and then finding your way and finding your own true identity. did you have any support in that sort of transition for people to, say, oh, you're going to do what? That you're going to run the London Marathon, but did you have to have a coach? Did you have any friends who supported you? I mean, where was that support? I'm thinking also because you might have not had a lot of confidence in yourself at that point to break out and do something and prove yourself.
I certainly had no confidence whatsoever. I lacked confidence so much. I used to go out in darkness. I wouldn't even be seen in daylight. I certainly wouldn't wear a pair of shorts. And I mean, I am talking about 30 years ago. So I would go out when it was dark, run around the streets very local to my home so that, I would get used to the area. And there was only one person really that had belief in me, and he was the guy that bought me them pair of running shoes. And when I say as a guy, this wasn't a partner or anything like this. It was somebody I worked with. He was coming up to retirement. He was an ex-army person, and he used to run to work and back. And I spoke to him because he knew I was a very quiet person, and he was actually quite a quiet person, and he got to know me. And I said to him that I'd like to run this London Marathon. And he said, oh, you're the right build for it. And he actually bought me a pair of running shoes. And he actually took me for a couple of training sessions after work. And I hate to say it because I was in my 20s then. He was coming up to retirement at 65. And I couldn't keep up with this guy. He was so good. And, how embarrassing for me. But, he persevered with me. And he did teach me quite a lot about running. And I did my first marathon. He said, oh, no, you can improve on that. But he was a real competitive person. And back then, I wasn't competitive. I just did the events. I never really became competitive till I did the long-distance stuff. And quite honestly, although I was competitive, it was just running the distance. And just by doing the distance, I was at the front of the field. So I think the competition came when you actually represented your country. And then instead of winning the events, you go to a world championships and then you realise, okay, there's about 10 people in front of me now, and then you had to have that competitive drive to be, to represent your country and take part in the World Championships. So
you have him to thank for buying you those running shoes and giving you a leg up, so to speak, metaphorically speaking.
Yeah.
But in those very early days, I mean, if you had not been sports oriented in any way, Sharon, did you have a sense of what it involved in terms of training? Did you have any help there? I mean, some people look for a coach or have a club to go to. How did you get the help that you needed, or was it you just learnt as you went?
I didn't have a clue. I had absolutely no idea where to go for a coach. I wasn't a member of a club. I had absolutely nobody, apart from this guy called David. Unfortunately, he's obviously passed away because this was 30 years ago and he was 65 back then. But yeah, he guided me a little bit to like building up distance and said you must do speed work, but I really didn't want to do speed work because I didn't like running fast. I got out of puff and things like that. And really, all I wanted to do was run the London Marathon, and all I'd done was basically built up the distance and then run the marathon with no knowledge on food, nutrition, training. Just each time I went running, tried to run a bit further. Once a week, tried to run a bit further than I had previously. And that's all I did, one long run a week and a few midweek training runs, nothing of any significant pace. And it wasn't really till I moved up north, and then I found this 50-miler and just basically did that off nothing. I didn't really, all I did was navigate the route, but I still didn't know how to train, how to eat. And even when I went to my very first 24-hour 100K race, I still had very little knowledge on nutrition or anything on how to train. I just did it off no training program. I wasn't a member of a running club or anything. And then that is why I went to do my sports science degree, because I didn't know how to interact with these people and how to gain a training program. So I actually learned the knowledge for myself by doing my own degree, and I've never had a coach. I am a member of a club, but even then, clubs didn't know what ultra-distance runners were, It was 30 years ago. I mean, nowadays it's a lot bigger. There are coaches for ultra-distance running. And even when I got into the ultra-distance squad for Great Britain, there wasn't coaches within the squad that could train ultra-distance runners because it was just such a different sport. I mean, there are now, but there wasn't back then. And it really was, okay, they go off your performances. If you've done 100K in a set time, then you get selected. And that's all they went for. There was no structure in place, and I trained myself, and I learned how to write a training program. I learned how to do back-to-back long runs, how to construct a progressive program using periodization, and I learned all the knowledge behind it, how your physiology works, how that fits in with nutrition, biomechanics, physiology. I learned all this at the university. So, yeah, I became a self-coached athlete.
And you mentioned their nutrition. I was going to ask you about that because that's obviously key. It's one thing to have the physique and be a naturally athletic runner, so to speak. That goes in your favour, obviously, physiologically. But when it came to the sort of finer art of nutrition and preparing yourself for a race, how much you should race before, what you should load your body with, and then how you should replenish it. How did you learn the finer art of all the nutritional aspects of being an ultra runner?
Yeah, I think tapering was more trial and error. Do I need a 1-week taper, a 2-week taper, a 3-week taper? And you had to do that by practicing it to see what worked for you. Same as mileage. When you talk about weekly mileage, you say, okay, I do 80, 90 miles a week. Back then, I did training programs that led up to 130 miles a week. And I soon realized 130 miles a week was too much. And I settled most of my career between the sort of 100, 110 miles a week. And because I am a little bit older now, that's why I have cut the mileage back to around 80 to 90 miles a week. But nutrition, again, I was very lucky. When I began university, we had a nutritionist there who took a really big interest in me because it was such a unique sport, and a sport where you really did need nutrition, not just for the race itself, but on a daily basis. And we quickly learned that, an ultra-distance runner actually needs pretty much the same as what a bodybuilder needs in terms of protein. And that was kind of my biggest shock, because through doing the long distance, you break down quite a lot of the body and you need to replenish that. So instead of saying, okay, you need X amount per day, it had to be calculated per kilogram of body weight. So I learned that, okay, for an ultra-distance runner, when you're running quite high mileage, you need at least 2 grams of protein per day per kilogram body weight. I was a 50 kilogram athlete, so that was quite easy. 100 grams of protein is what I need per day. And then you'd calculate that out per meal. And I was quite technical with the way I used to do my food, and then tried to balance it between, quite a high 60, 65% of that used to be in carbohydrate and the rest was in fat. And I used to do weekly food diaries, plug them in the computer to see what came out. So that was my daily routine in terms of figuring out my food. And then again, there was a racing strategy. When you did 100 Ks, 24 hours, how much do you eat, drink compared to those races? And this is where sports science really didn't help, because the scientists would say, okay, you need 50 grams of carbohydrate per hour. As a small athlete trying to eat or drink 50 grams of carbohydrate per hour, I lasted for 6 hours, by which point I just couldn't face another thing and had to go 6 hours with absolutely nothing because it was too much for me. And I had to learn that again through trial and error. Although you got the science on your side, it was a case of what works for your body. And it was a very simple case, a very simple thing that I still use even today. Eat 1 item of food per hour minimum, and that works. It doesn't matter what that food item is. When I'm racing, 1 item of food will keep the acids at bay in my stomach, keep my stomach doing something. And that gives me enough fuel for the race, because you've got enough fat supplies to supply you for the whole of the race. And so all you're doing is topping it up and keeping something in your stomach so you're not completely running on empty. And that's the principle I still use today. 1 item of food per hour, which could be a quarter of a sandwich, a pot of custard, half a pot of yogurt, half a banana, something very small, but frequently.
That's fascinating. And clearly you're a scientist through and through. I'm curious, how tall are you, Sharon?
About 5'4". What's that in terms of meters? 1.66 meters.
Right, so you're not necessarily tall. You're a very compact size.
Yeah.
And then you talk about the nutrition for every day, but then you've raced in extreme conditions, of course, in the heat and snow and and all of that, and then you have to adjust, right, then to all of that.
Absolutely. It depends on the nature of the race. And I've done such a variety of races. I mean, there's races when you can have any food you want and you take it with you. There are races when, if you're talking about the hottest one, that was like Badwater, which many Americans have done. And that was like working out the back of a car as you're traveling across. So you have to buy all your food in advance and figure out what you're going to have, because you're not going to go to the shops. There's not really a lot of shops en route to buy anything you want. And I was very easy back then that I knew drinks was vital. Food, drinks was more important than food, because if you get dehydrated, overheat, that's the end of your race. But if you run out of food, you can still carry on. So to me, drinks were always a priority and staying hydrated. So that was the key to that one. And then I did my same principle as what I always did, and that was a quarter of a sandwich every hour. And I think it got highlighted in the papers, Sharon runs across Death Valley off cheese sandwiches. And that was literally all I did. But other races are very, very different. A lot of the desert races I've done, although they're very hot, you are unsupported in them. So you've got to carry everything you're going to eat and drink in your pack. You get maybe water, a few litres of water every 6-8 hours. So you have to carry an awful lot of the water. And the only food you get in some of these non-stop races, I've done 160 miles across deserts non-stop, checkpoints roughly every 6 to 8 hours. And all your food is in your backpack, along with all your sleeping for everything you need for the whole of the race. So you can't go with sandwiches because they just don't last. And so it is kind of made mainly of drinks and a few little snacks. And I eat very little. I must admit, some of these races I've done, I can barely say I've eaten 5,000 calories and run 160 miles off that. So you do lose weight when you do them. But that's what I say. If you get dehydrated, you can't finish the race. But if you run out of food, you can still run. You've still got enough body reserves. And often in the desert races, that's what happens. I do eat into my body reserves to run these races.
And you talk about being a natural scientist, something you clearly went into and it's benefited you in your running career. But let's just go back to when you grew up in Cambridge and you were in school there. What made you want to go to university? Because people might think, well, why didn't you go to Cambridge University? What made you? What was the transition from school where you had your secondary education or high school education, and how did you choose the pathway that you did?
Yeah, it was kind of sort of chosen in some ways for me, because obviously when I left school, let's just call it the home scenario, was you have to go to work to earn money. I didn't go to university, I didn't go to college. It was a case of family life was, my sister grew up, she was, my brother got kicked out first, then my sister, and then when it came to me, it's like, no, you've got to earn money, we want, So I had to get a job, and I ended up just I think I became an office clerk, something like that, in what was a government building. So it was just a basic job as an office person, and this is where I met David, who brought me the pair of shoes. That was my very first job, just literally working in an office, very quiet, couldn't move on, couldn't progress up the ladder. And again, I left home pretty much as soon as I was old enough. I left home because even though I got a job at 16, home life was pretty awful. And so university was never a thing back then. I wasn't going to go to university. It didn't even cross my mind. I had to get a job. I had to work. Obviously, I realised through work that I was never going to progress up there. It was frustrating. I was living in a one-room bedsit, couldn't buy a house because I couldn't afford a house. And so I moved to the northeast, where I could afford to buy a house, because the housing in the northeast was much cheaper than in the south. So that's part of the reason, cheaper housing, get away from the family scenario. And believe it or not, I became a bus driver. It was just one of those jobs that happened to be going at the time. Never an intention to be a bus driver. And it was while I was on the buses that I actually met my husband, who'd just come out of the army. And he just got a job as a bus driver. And we all trained a group of people to do the Great North Run, which is a big local run here. And then it was a case I bought my house, but you're still not happy. You got your house, you're running and working as a bus driver, another dead-end job. And then something happened that changed direction. It was when I'd done this first 50-miler, 100-miler, and then 3 lads jumped on my bus and beat the life out of me to pinch the takings for the day. I don't go to work to get beaten up. So I had this little bit where, what do I do now? I've got to change jobs. And it was just at the beginning of my running career where I just run this 100-miler, was pretty good at running, about to take part in the first national championships. And this thing popped up in the paper about this sports science degree, and I thought, well, that's how I can learn about it. But I didn't realise I could actually do it. I didn't think I had the qualifications to do it. So I went to gain an access course, which is a bit like A-levels, but it's for mature people. So it was a 1-year course, gain an access course, that gains you a qualification to go to university. So I didn't have the normal A-level route of going to university. So I could do this part-time while I was working. So I just got some job doing, I think it was sandwich delivery back then, just to get a job. And I did this access course, and the following year I went to university to start my degree. And by that stage I'd done my first national championships and got my first international vest, and was very eager to learn about sports science. So that's how that all came about. I just had no intentions of ever being academic, going to university. It just didn't exist in my family. And I was the first person in my family to go to university. And that's how it all came about, pure chance, being in the northeast.
Which university?
Teeside, where I live now, Teeside University.
And now you're a university lecturer, so tell us about that career transition as well.
Oh, I think it is, yeah. It was never planned. I didn't really know what to do with my degree. My degree was there to learn me how to run and to become the best athlete I could be. And as a side shoot to that, you needed to work. So initially I did a bit of teaching at a college, and I got my postgraduate certificate in education to be able to become a teacher. I also got my master's so that I could further my knowledge, and again through my running, and to become back to teaching. But I kind of turned a full circle. I started teaching, and then obviously the running took a sidestep in terms of injuries. And when you get injured, you have to understand your own body in terms of injuries. So although I knew how to train my body, I didn't know how to treat my body for injuries. So then I kind of went into sports therapy and took a sideways track from the sports science and set my own business up in sports therapy, mainly so I could treat myself and treat others and run it as a business, which I did do very successfully for a number of years. And then that kind of ate into my own private time because it was some way too successful, and I couldn't pass it on to other people. When people wanted to come to my sports therapy, it was me they wanted to see because I had the knowledge, and I couldn't employ somebody else because they wouldn't see the other person. No, we want to see you, Sharon. So it ate into my time too much, and then I had to do something with that. So I kind of went back into teaching so that I could control the amount of hours that I was actually working again, and not have to do evenings and weekends. And university was really good for that because it's mainly a 9-to-5 teaching job. Okay, there's times when you have extra work to do outside of those hours, but the physical hours you're teaching, 9 to 5, you get weekends off. So it really worked well. And I worked local with the university I got my degree at. I did my degree there, my master's there, and I now teach there. So again, it's very local. Obviously, I did get married. The husband I met on the buses, he's now a lorry driver, I might add, because what happened to me also happened to him. The difference was he fought back, but it was just such a frustrating job that he's now on the lorries and driving wagons as opposed to driving buses. And we actually ran away to Gretna Green to get married as well 27 years ago.
Did you literally run away?
Well, we didn't tell anyone, so we ran away in that sense, but we didn't actually run to the wedding venue. But we didn't tell anyone. We just went away, got married, and then come back and told the families. It was obviously my family. Yeah, well, that's another thing. But yeah, I got welcomed into Bill's family, yes.
So what are you lecturing now? What's your topics?
Well, it varies every year because I'm kind of one of those very flexible people. But I have done exercise physiology, environmental physiology. I've done sports psychology. Again, through my sport, it's kind of one of the most... the things of sport, it's got to be one of the most psychological sports out there. You can train to be as fit as you can, but you've got to have the understanding on how the mind works to fight on when the body's kind of wanting to stop. And the other side of it, I actually teach business now. So managers in terms of personal effectiveness, in terms of their ability to understand themselves and understand others, which is a little bit of psychology that comes into that, goal setting and understanding self and others. So those are the main subjects I teach now.
I think it's interesting, the parallels, obviously, between your career and your career path and how you've made that pathway that you have. You've made your own way from that shy little girl who probably had no ambitions, certainly no confidence at all, and you've made it work for you and your running career. But it seems that the running was the turning point, and we hear this very often, how it really has helped people to develop into, what they want to do, to give them the confidence and to have ambitions where you otherwise might not have had, because you've got obviously natural talent there, Sharon. And I'm looking at your, the highlights, so many highlights in your running career, but I'm going to ask you to pick out, say, 3 that really have meant the most to you.
Yeah, I could probably very easily pick out 3 as well. My first run that was the most emotional run was actually that London Marathon. To actually run a marathon and finish it, I cried my eyes out at the finish. Everybody cries their eyes out. I don't know why. You've got to experience it to do it. But to think you can run a marathon was just one of the most emotional things I'd ever done. And then you think, well, when you run 50 miles, you think that'd be more emotional, but it wasn't. I think the next big one was the very first world record I ever broke. Because when I came in ultra-distance runner, I always wanted to break a world record. It's one of the things I'd done at university. We had to say, when I learnt what goal setting was, well, what's the next goal you want to achieve? Well, that's easy. I've just run my first international and I came 6th place. I want to get a medal at the next international. And yeah, I ended up with a silver medal. So that was my short-term goal. But what's your long-term goal? And my first, I wanted to run the length of Great Britain. I'm British. I was proud to be British. And I wanted to run from one end to the other, which was Land's End to John O'Groats. I didn't know how far it was. I didn't know who held the record, but I actually wrote that down in an assignment. And I dreamt about that for 12 years before I actually did something about it, and then went and tried to run this to break the world record. So again, that was one of the big races of my career, breaking my first world record. And the furthest I'd ever run was 140 miles. And then I went and run 840 miles, and not just ran it, but broke the world record in doing it. And again, like, as soon as you finish it, you think, well, this will be the most emotional thing of my life. But I was just so tired. I really couldn't care less. I just wanted to take my shoes off and go to sleep. But it was a big race. It was the aftermath of it. It's not when you're actually doing it. It hurts like anything, and you finish it, and it's like, okay, that's done. And it's not until the end of the year you sit back and realise what you've done. And really? I broke a world record? And then you get emotional over it. So, yeah, so that was a really big one in my career. Another one was the Commonwealth Championships. Although we had World Championships, European Championships, it sounds daft, but I'd never done an international race. On home soil, it was always Japan or somewhere else, somewhere in Europe, and I'd never run a big international on home soil. And the Commonwealth Championships was the first race to come to home soil. And people were going to come and watch me, which has never happened because nobody watches me when I'm abroad. It's just whoever's there. And it was a big thing to do my first ever Commonwealth Championships. And I was favourite for the gold medal as well, so it was a big one for me. And I did actually walk away with the gold medal, which was fantastic. To stand on top of the podium in front of your home crowd was brilliant. So that was a really special one to me. I ran 140 miles, 226 kilometres in, a day. So, yeah, I was pleased with that one. And the toughest race in my career, sorry, I know I've said three, but the toughest one was actually a race called the High. I've done extreme races. And although I've done hot, cold, high altitude, I could never write down numbers of how hard altitude is compared to all the other extremes of conditions that you can get. Running at 18,000 feet when you can hardly breathe and you feel sick and you can't eat. And, I broke the men's record there by about 11 hours, so it was another cracking performance.
It certainly was. What year was that Commonwealth Championship that you took? Was that at Glasgow?
No, it was actually, we actually held our event at Keswick in 2009. It was the first introduction to ultra-distance running to the Commonwealth Championships because we'd never been included in some of the big events, so you have to have championships to build up to the Commonwealth Games. And so we had athletes from New Zealand and Australia and India, so it was a worldwide event, but it was held here in Keswick in Great Britain.
And of all of those highlights, in which obviously you have so much to be proud of, which one would you say, if you had to pick out one, that you would tell your family in years to come, the one thing I am most proud of is what?
Well, I suppose it's got to be the first world record because it was so much into the unknown. It was longer than I'd ever run before. I had to have a crew that I wasn't used to, run alongside the roads, having a crew that has to do everything in a moving event. And the planning that went into it, 2 years of planning to prepare for that, that would probably be the big one, I guess, yeah.
And what are you looking forward to this year? You said you're racing most weekends. What does the year look like for Sharon?
Oh, the year's started off pretty big and it's getting bigger. I'm 55 and I wanted to, I'm not going to stop running, but I wanted to do some more big world records before I'm not able to. I mean, obviously being vet 55, you can do vet records, but I still wanted to break some outright records. And I have some goals to achieve. I started off in the end of January, February by planning the first part of what I was going to be doing this year. I went to Athens to do a 6-day race. The goal was to break a few vet records there, which I did do, but to practice sleep deprivation or how pace was affected by lack of sleep. And so that was my first trial of the year in doing Athens, which is a build-up to the next big one. The second part of the trial was what I did over the bank holiday weekend at the end of May. I ran 220 miles along Britain's longest river, which is River Severn from the source to the mouth. But it wasn't 220 miles non-stop. It was in a stage race where you run a marathon followed by 45 miles, followed by 60 miles, and a marathon to finish with. So that, again, was trialing, can I still run 60 miles a day plus and get up the next day and run again? So that's what that event was about. And that is a lead-up to, if I just said what my biggest event ever was Land's End to John O'Groats, I'm actually going to try and do it again the other way around from John O'Groats to Land's End, and I've actually set the date. There's no big announcement yet. It's going to happen very soon, but the 21st of July, I plan to try to break the world record running it the other way from John O'Groats to Land's End and do what I planned to do back then. I did it in 12 days, 16 hours and 22 minutes. I always planned to do it in under 12 days, and okay, I got a few problems en route and I went 16 hours over. I now plan to go back and try to do it in sub 12 days. So that is my next big goal, and I do have one little goal to achieve after that before I kind of settle down into a little bit less running, and that is to achieve a world record of running on a treadmill for 1,000,000 meters. Back in 2011, I set the world record on a treadmill for running for a week, which was 833k. That superseded the women's record by over 100 miles and the men's world record by over 50 miles. And so, yeah, I plan to go back, instead of running for 7 days, up it to 1,000,000 meters, which is 1,000 kilometers, and maybe call it a day then.
Well, I know there's people thinking, they use a treadmill because they have to, because of the weather or whatever, but to be on a treadmill for that length of time, that many miles, they'll probably think you're crazy, Sharon. What do you do during that time? Because that's a lot of TV shows to watch or podcasts to listen to.
Yeah, I often get called this. I even had a master's student that actually did a dissertation on "Are ultra-distance runners mad?" and they interviewed me on that subject. They concluded that we're the most sane people because we have to be so organised in our lives to be able to fit our training in around our working jobs to be able to do it. But yeah, I think the thing about treadmill runs, it's stationary. It's much easier to organise. Like things like Land's End, John O'Groats, you're on a moving convoy. It's difficult. You've got roads, traffic. Treadmills are very easy to organise, even easier than, say, track races, because you're just stationary and everyone comes to you. And it's just about your mentality and how you can deal with just running on a treadmill. And obviously I've done this before. Believe it or not, everybody had TVs there, films there, the radio was there. Everything was there if I wanted to watch it, listen to it. And I never once switched anything on. I don't even have earphones and music. I'm such an very internally focused person. It's a distraction to me. If I had something on, like a TV on, it's just a distraction. And if I put music in my ear, it's like a bee buzzing in my ear. It's just a noise. I just like the natural environment. And I have floor-to-ceiling windows, what I looked out when I'd done the previous world record attempt. So I was looking out over the campus. And obviously I did it at Teeside University because the sports science was stabbing me with needles every 3 hours to take a little bit of blood to see what was happening to my body. And we actually did do a written research paper on this too. So that's the other side of it, being a sports scientist, what happens to me when I run these long things. And so, so it's just, that's how internally focused I have been. But again, I do blame that on my childhood. Oh, I say blame. It's a result of childhood where you had to become a determined person to survive in life. That still probably was inbuilt, and how I can internally focus and concentrate on me to fight through these things.
You've certainly put it to good use, Sharon, and I'm going to ask you to end on a personal note. When you're not looking at your records, not looking at your achievements or your goals to come, but what running has actually done for Sharon Gayter because of the childhood you had, the challenges that you had in your own personal development. What would you say that running has most meant to you?
I think even back then, I probably didn't realise what it was doing for me back then, but it did. It does give you confidence. It just builds you as a person. There is the health and the fitness factor there, but just to do something for yourself. Everything in life is done for other people, and running is done for me. And it is such a character-building sport. And things like parkrun nowadays, there's such social events where you can instead of going down to the pub and having a drink, why don't people go to a park run and have a coffee afterwards? It's just, it makes the world a better place. There's nothing negative about running. It's all positive. And just running, even when I can't do any records, I will still run. I would, it'd be the world's place if I just could not run. I just love running, and it really, it's my life. It's a daily routine. And I dread to think, I know mental health issues are a big thing nowadays. And possibly if I hadn't have found running, there may have been problems like that for me down the line. I don't know. Luckily, I didn't have those problems further down the line. But, that's probably prevented me from having problems.
Yeah, I'm sure it has been your saving grace. And there's many more miles to go, or kilometres, and a lot more fun to be had. So stay injury-free, Sharon, and continue to enjoy your racing.
I will do, thank you.
And thank you very much for taking the time to come on the programme. We really appreciate it. Good luck with your races.
Thanks, Chris.
Conversations from the world of women's sports. This is Wisp Sports Radio.
And you could find a link to Sharon's website by going to our website at wispsports.com. And I do hope you'll enjoy some of the other coverage that we have here at Wisp Sports of women's sports around the world, from articles to blogs, videos, and of course the podcasts, which, if you're not subscribing yet on your podcast app, just look for Wisp Sports and refresh the app every week to get the latest episodes of the Wisp Sports podcasts. And I hope you'll join in the conversation either on social media at Wisp Sports or by dropping us a line to info@wispsports.com if you have any suggestions for guests that you think we should be including here, not only on the Bolder Woman podcast, but any of our shows here on the network. We'd always love to hear from you. That's info@wispsports.com. Until the next time, thank you for listening and supporting women in sport everywhere as we turn up the volume on women's sports. Goodbye for now.
This is your moment. This is your moment in time. This is your moment. This is your moment to shine, to shine, to shine. So shine on. And every time you hit the wall, remember you can have it all, even the mighty fall. It's closer than it's ever been, and now it's more than just a win. It's where your life